Chapter 10. Southampton, Wednesday, April 10, 1912, 12:15 p.m. Paddy Burns was in pickpocket's heaven. True, Belfast had been home to purses aplenty, but a fellow had to know what to look for. Here on the Titanic's first-class promenade, the wealth was so abundant it seemed like you ought to be able to hold out a bucket and have it fill itself with silver and gold. It was a struggle to keep his eyes in his head as elegant ladies stood waving at the rail, wrapped in thick, lustrous furs and bedecked with jewels that would not have been out of place in the Tower of London. If their menfolk glittered somewhat less, it was in suits and cloaks of such exquisite tailoring that even a Belfast street lad could not fail to notice the quality. Paddy could only imagine the contents of the purses and money clips that bulged beneath all that fine cloth. Far more than the measly £1 banknote that had cost poor Daniel his life. The thought triggered a wave of melancholy, and Paddy patted his breast, where he still kept Daniel's sketch for Thomas Andrews. He had seen Mr. Andrews around the ship several times already. It was strange, for all the Titanic's grandeur, Andrews seemed to see only problems. Paddy had overheard him lamenting the number of screws in the stateroom coat hooks, or the fact that the kitchen stores could accommodate only 40,000 eggs, and not the 43,000 the quartermaster had requested. Right now, the great man was on the bridge with Captain Smith and his officers, watching the tugboats guide the Titanic to open waters. Paddy couldn't see him, but he imagined the designer's expression, careworn and exhausted from overwork, as if the entire world wasn't singing his praises. Paddy had considered showing Daniel's sketch to Mr. Andrews, but then Paddy would be revealed as a stowaway. He'd be arrested, locked in the brig until he could be sent to prison in America or England. Of course, there were 3 square meals in prison, but he'd heard other things about it too. Terrible things, far worse than an empty belly. It was enough to convince Paddy that he wanted no part of it. If he could learn Mr. Andrews' stateroom number, he could slip the page under the door. But what earthly good could that do? Paddy had spent hours staring at the drawing. He could not make head or tail of it. Besides, Daniel Sullivan was more than a wrinkled leaf of paper. He was dead, and not even the great Thomas Andrews himself could change that awful fact. "You there! You're not being paid to daydream!" A white-jacketed steward thrust a tray of brimming crystal champagne glasses into Paddy's hands. "Don't you know who these people are?" he hissed into Paddy's face. "They have to be served before they even think about what they want. Go offer a glass to Major Butt over there. He's military attaché to President Taft. And that's Colonel Roebling. His family built the Brooklyn Bridge, you know." The steward listed several other famous names, but none of them meant very much to Paddy, who had never heard of Brooklyn or its bridge. He knew these were fancy people and very rich, and he also knew that he wasn't here to serve them champagne or even to walk among them. He'd better get himself out of sight before someone else realized it too. His uniform made him look like he fit in. But as the voyage progressed, the crew would learn exactly who belonged and who didn't. He was pretty sure he'd spotted that underage steward called Alfie, the one he'd overheard in the uniform room. And if Paddy was recognizing people, other crew members would too, possibly even Alfie himself. Paddy circulated among the passengers at the rail and distributed his drinks in their sparkling glasses. He couldn't prevent himself from smiling. Being so close to so many fat pigeons ripe for plucking made his fingers itch. It was perhaps fortunate that his hands were busy balancing the tray, or he might have come away with enough money to buy legitimate passage aboard this floating palace. Oh, how Daniel would have laughed. A well-dressed swell, a little younger than the others, put a dove-grey-clad arm around Paddy's shoulders. "You'd best save the last one for Mr. Strass, lad," he said, indicating an elderly man standing with his wife gazing out over the bow of the tugs. "He's the owner of Macy's department store in New York, you know. They say he's worth more than 50 million American dollars. Paddy sized the man up. He seemed no different from any of the other first-class passengers. Confident, exquisitely dressed, like he owned the world, which he probably did, or at least a good chunk of it. Amazing, Paddy thought dizzily. A week ago I was eating out of dustbins, and now I'm standing next to a $50 million man. Suddenly, a series of cracks as loud as gunshots cut through the air. The steel hawsers mooring a smaller ocean liner snapped like wooden toothpicks. Paddy stared in amazement. It was the American liner New York, and it was floating directly into the Titanic's path.
Are they daft? We'll smash them to bits.
The young swell peered intently ahead.
That ship isn't moving under her own power. Then whose power is moving her?
Paddy asked in alarm.
Are you saying she's sailing herself?
The Titanic displaces 66,000 tons, the man replied grimly. The suction must have torn that ship clear out of her moorings. See, she's moving backward. The festive chatter on the promenade died abruptly as the stern of the New York drew closer to the Titanic's port bow, tossing like a dinghy in the overpowering wake of the oncoming liner.
We're going to ram her,
Paddy breathed. Hundreds of passengers braced for impact. The $50 million man held onto his wife as they watched the drama unfolding below. The smaller vessel bounced high on a wave and veered around, swinging toward the hurtling black steel of the Titanic's hull. Paddy closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, it was all over. The New York had wheeled past them, missing a catastrophic collision by perhaps a few feet. The swell let out a long breath, and then raised his glass. To Captain E.J. Smith, the finest, most experienced skipper on the sea. Paddy nodded weakly, but in his mind, a discordant note had disturbed the regular thrum of the ship's engines. No amount of experience mattered on board the Titanic, which was so much bigger than everything else afloat that she could pull full-sized steamers clean out of their secure berths merely by lumbering past. Only Titanic experience mattered, and since this was the maiden voyage, no captain had that. Does anybody really know how to sail this boat? He wondered. Chapter 11. RMS Titanic, Wednesday, April 10, 1912, 8:45 p.m.